Okay, we're going to continue to put together this mosaic and invite Enrique Cardiel to come up. And he is a community health worker, has a master's in public health, and has worked in the with the state of Albuquerque for many years, but also is a longtime resident of the International District. Considers this his home and the people his neighbors. And so we want to hear his heart and his life. And he's hugging everyone on his way up, so that's good. Nice guy. So come on up and share your story.
Appreciate that.
I know I'm short, but I don't like to stand up for long periods of time. It's really hard for me to try to figure out how to follow up the conversation at this point. So I've lived in the neighborhood 20 years. I live on a block that is slightly rougher than average, I think. There have been 5 homicides on this one block in the 20 years I've lived there. I asked people, like, what other one block in Albuquerque has that? And no one's been able to answer me yet. And then the next block over is a few homicides. You know, so I get encouraged sometimes by my well-meaning white friends to move out. But we moved into the neighborhood on purpose. My wife's Filipina, I'm Chicano. And, you know, for anybody that knows Albuquerque, this is the largest Asian population in this community. The census tract where Joanne lives is the highest density per square mile of any census tract in the state. And in this census tract is second. So, for those of you who may learn about Albuquerque through the city or state's tourism department, this is really the most urban part of the state, not downtown. Downtown has tall buildings, but that's different. And so we moved here on purpose. I purchased low-income housing. I was $23 short of not qualifying for low-income housing when we bought the house. And there's pros and cons to it. You know, we own a home, and I spent the whole first year of living there waking up and looking at the apartment building across the street and trying to figure out, why do I get to own a house and these folks don't? I had a hard time with that. Our house has been on cops in Albuquerque as they arrested a young guy who lived across the street. I remember the marches Joanne talked about. This when I was fairly new to the house. I was wanting to go to the store and I couldn't because there was a police car parked in front of my house and a bunch of people yelling at my neighbors across the street. And so I just kind of looked and watched. And so a gentleman walked up, up into my yard and up to where I was at and asked me, don't I want to join in at yelling at my neighbors? And I was like, why do I want to yell at my neighbors? Where they're dealing drugs and doing all of this. And I was like, well, they're probably dealing drugs to make money. We all have a job. And some of our jobs are harmful to people, but we don't go to your workplace and yell at you. And I said, and you're going to leave. You guys are brave, or think you're brave, but you're there with police officers who are armed, and you're going to leave. These people know where I live. Right? So I've seen a lot of different things in a different way, right? We're going to do a walk actually right around this area tonight at 5. for pedestrian safety, because Central is a place where a lot of people get hit by cars. And people ask me, well, aren't you scared walking in the neighborhood? I'm like, no. Honestly, the largest harassment I've had in my 20 years walking down the street, looking the way I do, has been by police officers. People who are paid to protect me, right? For my wife and my daughter, it's a different story. Being a woman walking in this neighborhood is a whole different experience. And I think that's just something we have to figure out. Is the expectation people have that a woman living in this neighborhood is doing a certain type of activity or available for a certain type of activity is a huge issue, something we have to address, right? Part of that is just the view of people have of this neighborhood, and a lot of that has to do with there's a lot of dark-skinned, low-income folks in this community. So all of that is challenging, right? And somehow I went from working with kids to telling kids to go to college, and remembering one day a kid asking me, so being in a nonprofit telling kids to go to college doesn't pay well, in case anybody wondered. So a kid called me out one day and said, well, how much money do you make? And I was like, I don't make that much, really, because I saw you drive in this morning. I saw the kind of car you drive. I can get a better car selling drugs. Right? And that's the truth. That's the reality that kids deal with, right? I've seen the raids of people who were selling drugs across the street. They're the parents of the kids who went to school with my kids. Right? So now you have a family with no income, because no one goes back and says, okay, how do we help this family out? People are like, let's just get these dealers, throw them in jail. And then you leave this whole family without income. Right? And if any of you have been around or been near a police raid, they're not necessarily kind and peaceful experiences. Right? So you're, as a child, on the ground with your mom and the rest of your family. And so there's been programs people have done around community policing, and I always knew when they got extra money because I'd get pulled over more often. And so those are the realities of ways we try to help people, right, that actually set people up. Right? The first time my son was pulled over, very first time he ever was pulled over because he had just gotten his driver's license, the officer pulled a firearm out on him because he didn't have the experience of, like, how do you respond, He's like, first time getting pulled over, didn't know what to say, what to do. So the officer pulled the firearm out. At the end, it turned out he was pulled over because he came out of Indiana block. I've been pulled over going home. And once I tell the officer I live in the houses instead of the apartments, they relax. Right? So all of those perceptions, impact, on a daily basis. So I ended up doing public health work in the southeast here. And I think the reason I got the job was there was a question that they asked us during the interview. And they said, given that there's only a limited amount of money for public health, what are you going to prioritize? And my response was, your question is wrong. There's a lot of money for public health. The problem is it's not getting put towards public health. So my job is to encourage the residents to ask their elected officials, why isn't more money going into public health? Because there's a lot of money. Even after a stock market crash, money doesn't disappear. It just goes into fewer pockets. And so, trying to do public health work as a government employee with the state and now with the county is challenging because you're not encouraged to have those kind of conversations as an employee as to like, well, where does this money go? Why is it that all of this money goes into locking people up and less money goes in towards keeping people out of jail? Those are tough things. So I really appreciate East Central Ministries, Interfaith Church, right, because they work out in the streets. My most important interactions I've had with people in this community have not been in my office, has not been in their office or in a meeting, has been with folks out in the street. I had a phone call several years ago, and this was the first time it happened, so this is why it sticks in my head. A young man called, he was drunk. He knew my daughter, so he asked for her, she wasn't there. I could tell he was intoxicated, and I talked to him. And about 2 minutes into the conversation, he started talking about, you know, you're the only man who ever told me to stay out of trouble. You know, in his entire life. I had a young man break into my house and take about $6,000 worth of stuff. And unfortunately, he took it to where it had to get repaired. So, so I got almost everything back, but now, you know, he's probably going to be doing 3 years for that. But before he had to go turn himself in, you know, he was out and didn't talk to me for like a year. Lived on the same block, so you can imagine how much fun it is to walk by each other. So he finally came to apologize. And really, you know, when the incident happened, people asked me, well, what do you want to happen? You know, don't you want him to go to jail and this and that? You know, most people I know go to jail come out with skills that I wouldn't want them to have in the first place. Jail is a training ground for people to become worse criminals. So I want him to go to rehab. And he was strung out and he broke into my house because he'd been there, he knew it was there. Because he was strung out. Right. Jail is not that place where he's going to get the help that he needs for that. So I get to do all kinds of strange things in work, you know. I have this giant email list from years of contacts with folks, you know, and on occasion someone will say, we're doing this outreach work for people who are sex workers. So I pass that information along so that other people who are interested and may want to help out can do so, and I get all the angry emails about how dare you help those folks. You know, and it reminds me of how many times I've been those people. First time I went to my neighborhood association meeting, there was a lot, you know, an elder standing up talking, standing next to an armed police officer, pointing actually towards the direction of my house from where this meeting was, and was talking about those people are a problem. So I didn't participate in my neighborhood association for 5 years. So I was like, I'm one of those people. I'm those folks' problem. I knew better, but I knew that's where they were coming from. And I'm like, why would I want to be a part of that? And it's taken me years to get beyond that. And you know, I've been my neighborhood association president since that time. But really, constantly just kind of having to deal with those things. You know, we have, for better or worse, people that come into the neighborhood and want to save us. We don't need to be saved. We need some help, right? We need some support, but we don't need to be saved. People in the community are pretty tough, resilient, however you want to frame it. People have been through a lot and have a lot of skills. I remember going with somebody door to door because, because I don't believe you're doing any much real outreach if you're not going door to door, and I always hold people to that. So it's kind of how I test people out. It's one of the ways. There's a few ways. That's one. If you're going to go door to door, I give you some points. If you're not, then you're in that category of folks. But they wanted to go door to door. They wanted to do a gardening training program, right? I'm like, are you sure? They're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, let's go door to door and talk to folks. So we went to this gentleman's house, and he didn't speak English, so I was translating. And we were there for, and he started laughing. He's like, you know why I'm here? And I said, I kind of knew, but I said, why? He said, because back at home I lived on the rancho, and all I did was grow stuff. And that's what my father did, and that's what my grandfather did, and I'd like my children to have an option to do something besides grow and pick food. And so I smiled, and I told the other gentleman that, and he didn't have a response, right? We don't often think of that. People often assume because we're broke or whatever other things you can assume that people don't have skills here. There's a lot of skill here. There's a lot of strength. And that's how we need to approach folks. I always get approached, because I do public health, to do community gardens. And so I always ask people, well, when I go driving around, walking around, I see people who are growing food. Instead of saying, let's take over an empty lot and create a brand new garden, why don't we go and help the folks who are gardening, see if they need some support to do it even better. And then let them teach their neighbors how to garden, instead of us doing it. So no one ever wants to fund that. Right, but there are, and we've started to get some folks who do grow their own food in the community, provide small spaces to start sharing information with folks, to start engaging. See, most of the time when people ask me to participate in community gardens, they haven't gone, and we don't do this enough. Anybody, they need to all do it more. People don't know my history, right? Why am I not excited about going and pulling weeds and doing that? I grew up picking. Industrial farm work, right? $1.15 was the minimum wage for farm work back when I was doing it. It's actually not much higher. It's still very low now. So I have no excitement at all about getting up on a Saturday and going to look at rows of food. That's not exciting for me. I don't even eat like strawberry ice cream. Much less want to go look and touch at real strawberries. All of those things are important. We had this quick conversation about bullies in the neighborhood yesterday. When we met, getting ready for today. So really, people are tough in this neighborhood. There are folks in the neighborhood who can be dangerous. But I'm willing to bet under the right circumstances, almost anybody in this room could be dangerous. A lot of us are able to hide that further deep than others. For some people, it's just on the surface. And there are people that we need to figure out how to get them some support until they're no longer dangerous and separate from the rest of us. But for the most part, people are just trying to take care of whatever they see needs to be taken care of. So I've had situations where I've had to run down the street chasing somebody with a baseball bat. After the incident was over, I had to ask myself, well, what would I have done if I had caught them? But that stopped the situation that was happening. Not that I caught them and hurt them, but just that they knew there would be a response. Right? There have been people who say, you know, I'm selling drugs, what do you think about that? And I'm telling them, you know, if I don't see children going into your location, we have a problem. The minute I see something I don't like or things start to disappear from where I'm at, you know, you're going to have problems because I'm living here. I was living here before you got here, and I'm going to be here after you get out. If you get out and go to jail and come back, I'll still be here. So there's just things I can't let happen. You can't mess with the kids in this neighborhood. Adults are adults, and you have to make your money. I make my money. But you know, once things get dangerous and your business starts to hurt other people around, you know, then we're going to have a problem directly. And you have to be brave, and you have to talk to folks that way. And it's smarter if you can think through what's your response if they call your bluff. I've been lucky for the most part, and most people just take me as serious and know you're setting up a boundary, and they respect that. Which is another thing. There is a lot more respect in this community than people think. Right? There's a lot of stereotypes about folks that are homeless, folks that do sex work, folks that sell drugs. And you know, I personally think things are less respectful than when I was a young man. But still, there are lines that people don't cross, for the most part. And again, there are those few folks that don't have any of those boundaries, and we need to figure out how to get them somewhere where they can be safe and we can be safe, and they get to work on that. But for the most part, people need support. People need jobs. People need some sense of dignity. People need some sense of pride. And it's challenging in this environment, and people also still find it if we pay attention and if we look. They may find it in places that many of us think is strange, but from their viewpoint, the things we're happy and proud about are strange things. So we just have to kind of try to keep that open mind and work with folks. Right? So I get to, you know, as a government employee working with nonprofits and all that, I get to do some things that make absolutely no sense. You know. I was assigned once to go to a homeless shelter and do education around healthy eating. Right now, like, really? It's like, you know, people who have like almost zero food options, right? Their food is not a choice in the same way that it is for those of us who have a roof and those kind of things. And you want me to go tell them, you know, how to eat healthier. Sometimes people really do fall asleep that deep, that's an assignment that we get, right? Right now we're working on a variety of things, pedestrian safety, because a lot of people get hit crossing the street for several reasons, right? One is the substance abuse stuff, but the other is we're in a part of town where the city and everybody else thinks it's fine to drive, 45, 50 miles an hour while there's a lot of pedestrians around. That seems to be fine. So it's not all on the pedestrians, right? It's also on the other end. We're telling people to eat healthy when people don't have control of the food they have access to. The closest food to my house is an Allsucks on one direction. The closest food, the other direction is a store called Size, which is basically a Circle K. So that's the closest food to my house. After that is then like churches, upscale food. Glad you left. Somebody did that. Right? So I think that's, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling here in general, but John hired me, so blame him. I think really just kind of, and I've been looking for the quote, this gentleman, Miles Horton, talked about you can't really serve the oppressed unless you live with them. Right? And so a lot of my public health co-workers, I remind them at the end of the day, you go somewhere else. You go to a neighborhood that looks a lot different than this neighborhood. And I stay here. And that's a huge thing, right? Because a lot of times my coworkers and not just directly, but just the public health folks in general, right, don't seem as urgent about some things or seem super urgent about other things. And some things are like, need to be dealt with now, and some things, they're just going to be a long process. And you have a different perspective on that when you wake up, and in the parking lot of the apartment building across the street, there's a gentleman, sleeping on somebody's, tossed out mattress, or in the cars, that are there parked on your street. Then when you go home and come back to it. And I think that is important. I think the things I appreciate most about John and Joanne and other folks that do this kind of work is that they live here, that they've lived here for a long time, and I expect them to live here a long time. I think they both know I kind of hold them to that on some level. And Lydia is walking distance from my house. A lot of other folks that I know in these kind of projects live close by. So I think really just kind of all of that to say it's much different to do this work with your own community than it is to come do it to somebody else's community. And I chose the language on that very clearly. And so I hope, as the one non-faith person that's been up so far in this panel, which was part of why it was difficult to figure out how to follow up, I think that's the important thing. Are you going to do things with your neighbors to make things better, or are you going to come and do things to people's community? And I think you all get to answer that question for yourselves, but that's the question I'd like to leave you with.